The politics of the internet are confusing, complex, and controversial. And at the middle of all the debates about network neutrality and SOPA and piracy and every other issue that Washington, D.C. is trying to figure out are the ISPs. So I thought it'd be an interesting opportunity to talk to the CEO of a small but growing ISP in Northern California, Dane Jasper of SonicNet, to talk to him a little bit about the politics of being an ISP and what Washington should and shouldn't do. Dane, welcome back to TechCrunch TV.
Thanks, Andrew.
What is your opinion on the politics of being an ISP? Where do you stand? You're in the middle of everything. You're the gateway to the internet for consumers. But of course, not all consumers are law-abiding, and some of the more criminal elements on the internet are undermining our entertainment industry.
It's true. It's a challenging space because we need to walk a line around protection of rights holders and the law, and protection of consumers from overreaching legislation, subpoenas, and warrants that would delve deeply into their privacy. And so, you know, we're against SOPA. We have great concerns about.
Why were you against SOPA?
SOPA, without enough technological input, tampers far too deeply in the technical underpinnings of the internet. And you know, it creates a framework for censorship. And you know, today we have laws that protect rights holders, you know, whether that be intellectual property, counterfeiting. You know, we have ways to protect those who create content and merchandise. And I think that a law that creates an entire framework around censorship creates a substantial temptation to, you know, future perversion. It's incorrect.
But the entertainment industry, not that they're here, but if I can speak on their behalf, would say that the law is, at this point, in some ways inadequate, especially pertaining to foreign websites. Would you accept there's some truth to that?
You know, I disagree, and I think that you know, if you look at MP3s and the piracy of music in the past decade, there was a huge rise in piracy. And then along came Apple and iTunes, and a legitimate market where you could buy anything you wanted for 99 cents. And suddenly piracy plummeted. So I don't think that the answer to piracy is to try and plug a finger in the leak over and over again. I think the answer is to make content available fairly and broadly. And I saw someone post on Twitter recently, they were looking for Seinfeld. You know, was there a place they could legitimately watch Seinfeld? And they couldn't find it. So I think that piracy to a great degree is driven by the lack of availability of content in a fair and accessible way.
How can ISPs help in that way? Would that mean that a company like yours or Comcast or AT&T and Verizon need to get into the content business? Do they need to innovate where perhaps Hollywood is unwilling to innovate?
You know, that innovation needs to come from rights holders. They have content that consumers want to purchase. They need to find ways to build conduits to those consumers. I think the role of internet service providers like us is to not stand in the way. In other words, to not cap consumption, to not unreasonably cap speeds. And I think that we've seen a trend in the other direction. Major internet providers are putting consumption caps in the US and in Canada on consumers and creating metered broadband where it's really unnecessary.
I've worked, though, on some consulting projects with a large unnamed ISP, and they argue that the internet hogs are slowing the network down for everyone. Is that fair?
That's an inaccurate characterization. Fundamentally, the cost of bandwidth is plummeting to near zero. And connectivity, internet transit, is effectively too cheap to meter. Looking at our total costs of delivering services, transit carrying traffic across the country into other networks comprises, over the last 5 years, between 1% and 2% of our costs. And meanwhile, transport, the movement of bits within our own network, is obeying faster than Moore's law. About every 9 months, the carrying capacity of fiber doubles. And where you used to buy interfaces and router ports and Ethernet interfaces that would drive fiber over distances 10 years ago for many thousands of dollars, today you buy a gigabit GBIC for $36 on Amazon. So the cost to carry bandwidth within our network has only dropped. And the cost to clear traffic off our network to other networks was small to begin with.
Where are the other 98% of costs then for your business?
Primarily staffing. So today, staffing makes up our largest cost. So that's customer service, technical support, sales, the interaction between us and customers. And that's an area that we take a lot of pride in. And I can say we spend, it's almost 20 times as much money on personnel to provide customer care and support than we do on the actual product that we sell, bandwidth. It's amazing.
Dane, some other countries outside the US have, it seems at least, been much more successful in terms of implementing broadband strategy. Korea in particular comes to mind. And Korea, of course, required a massive investment from the state to lay down their quick lines. What do you think the role of the US government should be in spreading fast broadband?
So the US government was on the right track in 1996 with the creation of the Telecom Act. And other countries around the world have followed. And you look at the cost per bit and the delivered average speeds in European countries, whether it's over copper or fiber, and in Asian countries, as you mentioned, Korea, Japan, China as well. And in the US, what we've seen is incremental gains, but substantially higher spend. And the one area for improvement would be to roll back the fiber forbearance decision of 2002, 2003. But I don't think it's going to happen. So that means in order to drive competition in the US, somebody has to build a third network. And there are some companies doing that. We're doing that in some areas. Other larger companies in the Bay Area are doing some of that. Well, Google is an example of someone who's doing that. But until we see more of that, I don't know that we're going to see anything beyond sort of stilted, gradual gains in the US.
How critical is all this for innovation, not only in the internet sector, but in the broader economy?
It's very important. The internet has driven astounding economic gains and innovation in the US. And I have real concerns about the capping of consumption and what that is going to do to innovation and business models in the future. And where consumers, the majority today of consumers in the US are constrained to between 150 and 250 gigabytes a month. In Canada, it's typically even lower. So what is that going to mean for the next great idea from a kid at Stanford who goes down Sand Hill Row looking for funding for a startup? Does it mean only the 140-character Twitters are going to get funding and the next Netflix is not? Because it's clear that there isn't an end game for replacing, broadband into the home. What video, 3D video, virtual presence, the kind of things that we think of in the future, the kind of things that were represented in the movies of a decade ago that still aren't here. They're never going to get here with caps on consumption.
Dane, is it possible that we need a two-tiered system, a first-class internet for people willing to pay for it?
Fundamentally, the cost is the physical infrastructure in the last mile. It's the connection to the premise. Everything that happens inside the network after that point is only dropping. It's dropping faster than consumption is increasing. So I argue against segmentation. I don't think you need to charge people who use more. Internet access is not a natural resource. It's not coal or oil or water. It's not mined or refined. It's created by a pair of interfaces between A and B on a piece of glass. And those interfaces are only getting cheaper. So we make internet access. We make it out of ether, and it isn't a natural resource. And so the idea of metering it like you do electricity or water or other hard-won resources doesn't make sense.
Dane, I don't think I've ever had anyone on the show before who have been so honest about the costs of their product. Why are you so honest? Or the lack of costs of their product? Because you're almost suggesting that you're selling air.
I mean, effectively you are. You know, you're creating,
why are you telling everyone this?
You're creating a connection, and you're creating the ability to communicate. And you know, we're innovating in that space. We're creating a disruptive product where we give away everything for one price. And we keep going back to the shop and thinking, what else can we throw into that to keep making it better? And so, and some of it's silly things. You know, every customer gets a fax number. You don't need a fax number anymore, but we could do it and it costs virtually nothing, so we add it in. Every customer gets a static IP. You know, well, why do you get a dynamic IP? Well, because static IPs cost something. Well, they don't. IP, you're on an IP whether it's static or not, you're consuming an IP. So, you know, our goal is to innovate by adding more and more free stuff to the product, and in doing that, make it so compelling that it's irresistible.
Finally, Dane, it sounds to me, as you're saying, that if 98% of the costs in your business are your people, this, in the long run, is what will distinguish ISPs, and that the ones that win and survive are going to be the ones with the best people, and particularly the best customer service. Is that fair?
Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case to date. And you know, you look at the dominant providers in the United States, and support is offshore, it's scripted, it's please reboot, reinstall, unplug, call me back, and that's challenging. You know, we're focused on customer service. We treat our customers with the respect that they deserve as internet users at varying levels of technological expertise, and our goal is to talk to them at the level at which they are. So, you know, if someone is naive about their connection, we're happy to speak to them in basic terms. If they're technical, we want to go right to a technical level and talk to them at that level. But I have to confess, it is a challenge. As we've seen in our organization, you know, we've grown our employee count by 50% in the last year. Where do we continue to find good, friendly, intelligent people to talk to our customers? And to date, we've been very successful at that. But I wonder how that will scale.
Well, maybe we need to look at Apple as in terms of their retail operation, as the model for all this. But as the customer of Sonic.net, who's always calling customer service, I can attest that none of your support people are offshore. They're all human. They're all wonderfully helpful. Dane Jasper, CEO and co-founder of Sonic.net, thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV, and congratulations on being so honest, perhaps too honest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.